It was planned as a regular show, but something went wrong at that moment, and a scandal that can be called the biggest in 2025 began. The studio lights burned hot, casting a golden glow on Senator Ted Cruz as he settled onto the plush guest couch across from Stephen Colbert. His posture stiff, but his smile practiced, the kind of grin that had weathered countless debates and campaign trails. The Late Show audience buzzed with anticipation, their applause a rolling wave that faded into a hum as Colbert leaned forward, his eyes glinting with that familiar mix of charm and mischief. The interview kicked off smoothly. Cruz, in his navy suit and crimson tie, fielded softball questions about his latest book and Texas barbecue preferences, his answers polished, almost too rehearsed, while Colbert tossed in light jabs about cowboy boots and Austin traffic, keeping the crowd chuckling. But the air shifted when Colbert, after a sip of coffee from his mug, pivoted sharply, his voice dropping an octave. "Senator, let's cut to it. Why did you back the effort to challenge the election results in 2020? The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples of murmurs spreading through the audience. Cruz's jaw tightened, his fingers adjusting his tie as he leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "Stephen, I acted within the Constitution, raising legitimate concerns about voter integrity, as is my duty as a senator," he said, his tone clipped, almost lecturing before adding, "You're hyping it up, as usual, turning a procedural objection into a TV drama." The crowd stirred, some clapping, others whispering, and Colbert raised an eyebrow, his smile tight but unshaken. "Hyping? Senator? Some might say contesting a certified election is the real drama," he shot back, his voice light but cutting. For a moment, tension crackled, Cruz's lips parting as if to fire back. But Colbert, ever the showman, waved a hand, chuckling, "All right, let's not rewrite history on live TV, yet." The audience laughed, the mood loosening, and Cruz forced a smile, though his eyes didn't join in. The conversation veered back to safer ground. Tax policy, energy jobs, Cruz relaxing into his talking points, Colbert nodding along, tossing in quips about windmills and brisket. But something lingered, an undercurrent, like a storm cloud hovering just out of sight. Then came the pivot. Colbert leaned in, his grin widening. "Okay, Senator, let's play a game. Imagine you're president. Dream job, right? What's the first law you'd sign and what's one you'd never touch?" Cruz paused, his fingers tapping the armrest, then leaned forward, sensing an opportunity to steer the narrative. "I'd sign a law securing the border. Real barriers, real enforcement, because we need order, not chaos," he said, his voice steady, drawing scattered applause. "As for what I'd never sign, anything that cripples American energy, oil, gas, the lifeblood of Texas jobs. We can't trade prosperity for green fantasies." The audience clapped again, some louder, others hesitant, and Colbert nodded, his expression unreadable. "Interesting, solid answer," he said, pausing just long enough to let the room settle. Then, with a glint in his eye, he leaned closer, his voice deceptively casual. "So, Senator, does that mean you think the climate crisis is just overblown?" The question hung in the air, sharp and deliberate, and Cruz's smile faltered, his hand freezing mid-gesture. Something big was coming, a spark ready to ignite, and the audience could feel it, their murmurs fading into a tense hush. "Trust me, this is just the start and you'll want to see where it leads." Cruz's smile, already thin, tightened into something closer to a grimace, his fingers curling around the armrest of the guest couch. "Stephen, I think the climate issue's been spun into a panic button to push bad policy," he said, his voice low and deliberate, each word measured like a chess move. "I'm not denying science, but I'm not signing up for plans that gut Texas's economy. Oil and gas put food on tables for millions." The audience stirred, a mix of claps and murmurs rippling through the crowd, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Colbert tilted his head, his grin sharp enough to cut glass. "So you acknowledge climate change, but if it means ditching fossil fuels, you're saying what? Let the planet cook?" The quip drew a quick laugh from the crowd, but it was laced with tension, and Cruz's eyes flashed, his posture stiffening. "That's a cartoon version of my stance, Stephen," he shot back, his Texas drawl sharpening. I'm saying we don't torch jobs and livelihoods for solutions that sound nice on paper but don't work in the real world. Families in Midland aren't eating solar panels. The crowd's reactions split, half cheering, half muttering, and Colbert leaned back, his fingers drumming on his desk, his smile unwavering but his eyes narrowing. Fair point, Senator, but let's say Houston's underwater in a decade. You gonna tell those families, hey, at least we saved that driller's job in Midland? The jab landed hard, the audience gasping audibly, a few sharp whistles cutting through the room. Cruz's face reddened, his jaw clenching as he leaned forward, pointing a finger. You love your New York one-liners, don't you? But in Texas, we deal with real people, not sitcom hypotheticals. You can't power a state on good intentions and windmills. The air crackled, the exchange no longer a dance but a duel. And Colbert, sensing the heat, pushed further, his voice half playful, half venomous. Oh, I'm sure those real people will thank you when it's 120 degrees and their corn's frying in the fields. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others booing, and Cruz's composure slipped, his voice rising. You're turning a serious debate into a comedy routine, Stephen. That's why folks trust farmers over late-night hosts. The insult stung, and for a split second, Colbert's smile flickered, his fingers pausing on the desk. The audience held its breath, sensing the precipice. Colbert recovered fast, leaning in with a mock-innocent tilt of his head. Ouch, Senator, hitting below the belt. But let's get real. When did protecting jobs become a free pass to dodge science? Cruz's eyes narrowed to slits, his voice dropping to a cold, cutting edge. When did mocking people's livelihoods become your brand of journalism? The room went quiet, the silence heavy, as if the air itself was bracing for impact. Then a shift. Colbert's producer, visible in the wings, signaled something, and a stagehand slipped a note onto the desk. Colbert glanced at it, his expression unreadable, then looked back at Cruz, his tone suddenly softer, almost dangerous. All right, Senator, let's pivot. You've talked a lot about protecting Texas, but what about the people who feel you've abandoned them, like, say, during that Cancun trip in the middle of the 2021 freeze? The audience gasped, a collective inhale that sucked the oxygen from the room. Cruz froze, his face a mask of fury and shock, his hands gripping the couch like a lifeline. The Cancun mention wasn't planned. It was a low blow, a deliberate dig at the scandal that had dogged him for years, when he'd jetted off to Mexico while Texans shivered in blackouts. That's ancient history, Stephen, and you know it, Cruz snapped, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. I owned it. I apologized. I came back to help. You want to dredge up old news to score points? Colbert didn't flinch, his eyes locked on Cruz's. I'm not scoring points, Senator. I'm asking why people should trust you to lead when, in a crisis, you were on a beach. The audience roared, a chaotic mix of cheers and jeers, and Cruz's face flushed deeper, his knuckles whitening. You want to talk trust? He fired back, his voice rising to a near shout. How about trusting a comedian who twists every issue into a punchline? You don't know Texas, Stephen. You don't know what it's like to fight for people who can't afford your Upper West Side rent. The crowd exploded again, and Colbert, for the first time, looked rattled, his fingers tightening around his mug. The tension was a living thing now, coiling tighter with every word, and the audience could feel it. A collision was coming, something neither man could walk back from. But just as Cruz opened his mouth to continue, his eyes flicked to the side, catching a glimpse of something, or someone, in the studio shadows, and his expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through his anger. Colbert noticed it too, his head tilting slightly, as if sensing a crack in the senator's armor. The moment stretched, taut and electric, the entire room poised on the edge of something explosive. Hang in there. This is about to get wild and you won't want to miss what's next. The studio air was thick. The tension between Senator Ted Cruz and Stephen Colbert, a coiled spring ready to snap, as the audience leaned forward, their collective breath held in the wake of Colbert's Cancun jab. Cruz's face was a storm cloud, his eyes darting briefly to the shadows where a stagehand lingered, then back to Colbert, who sat with his hands folded, his smile gone, replaced by a steely gaze that dared Cruz to respond. You want to keep digging up the past, Stephen? Cruz said, his voice low but shaking with fury, each word a blade. I made a mistake. I owned it, and I've fought for Texans every day since. You think you can boil my career down to one trip? The crowd murmured, a mix of sympathy and skepticism. But Colbert didn't blink, his voice cutting through the noise like a scalpel. I'm not boiling anything down, Senator. I'm asking why, when your state was freezing, you thought a beach was the answer. The audience erupted, cheers and boos colliding in a chaotic roar, and Cruz's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white against the dark fabric of the couch. You're not asking. You're performing, he spat, his Texas drawl thick with disdain. This isn't a debate, it's a circus, and you're the ringmaster. Colbert leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, but his tone stayed eerily calm. A circus? Maybe. But when people are suffering, they don't need a senator who checks out. They need one who shows up. The crowd roared again, louder, and Cruz's face flushed crimson, his breath coming fast, his control slipping. For a moment he seemed to teeter on the edge of a retort, his mouth opening, then closing, as if the words were too hot to speak. Then, in a move that stunned the room, he stood abruptly, ripping the microphone from his lapel with a sharp tug, the tiny device clattering to the floor. I'm done with this, he said, his voice a raw, jagged edge, loud enough to carry over the gasps of the audience. You want a punching bag? Find someone else. He turned, striding toward the stage exit, his footsteps heavy, deliberate, as the crowd's noise swelled into a chaotic mix of shock and jeers. Colbert, caught off guard, rose halfway from his chair, his hands raised as if to call him back. Senator, come on, we're just talking. But Cruz didn't turn, disappearing into the wings as the stagehand scrambled to follow. The studio fell into a stunned hush, the lights too bright, the silence too heavy, until Colbert, ever the professional, forced a tight smile and faced the audience. Well, folks, that's a first, he said, his voice light but strained, coaxing a nervous laugh from the crowd. Guess we'll take a quick break. The band struck up a frantic tune and the cameras panned away, but the energy in the room lingered like smoke after a fire. By the time the show cut to commercial, social media was already ablaze, clips of the exchange ricocheting across platforms, hashtags like #CruzWalks and #ColbertClash trending within minutes. Some called Cruz a coward for storming off. Others hailed him for refusing to play Colbert's game. Some branded Colbert a bully. Others praised his nerve for holding power to account. The internet split into camps, each side digging in, the arguments spilling into comment threads and group chats, a digital wildfire no one could contain. Backstage, Cruz's team scrambled to spin the narrative, while Colbert in his dressing room stared at the monitor replaying the moment, his expression unreadable, a mix of regret and defiance. No one knew if Cruz would address it, if Colbert would apologize, or if the moment would fade into late-night lore. What lingered, unspoken, was the rawness of it all. Two men, each believing they'd been wronged, each carrying the weight of a nation's divides, and neither backing down. The story wasn't over, not by a long shot, and the world was watching, waiting for what came next.